Welcome to the Saugus Historical Society. The road you are looking at in the picture is one you probably travel down a few times a day if you still live in Saugus. But it looks a bit different, I think, than last time you were there. That actually is Route 1. I'm not sure exactly what year, but before it was paved, for many, many decades it was a dirt road because it was built quite early. It opened as the Newburyport Turnpike on February 11th, 1805. And it was privately built. They collected tolls. Just a little south of Essex Street, there was for many years a toll house. And the main people, there was a price for foot traffic, so walking up you'd have to pay half a penny or something like that. And for horses and wagons, for people on horseback, there were different prices depending on what they thought they should get. And this went towards making back the cost that they spent on this very expensive for the time roadway. The tolls were collected until about 1847, and that's quite a few years, but at that point what happened was that the railroad traffic, not right on Route 1 but on several train routes nearby, was taking an awful lot of the business traffic away from Route 1. And people were saying, oh, what a waste of money this was. Nobody uses it. People try to avoid it. Route 107 was also a toll turnpike. I remember from maybe when I was 5, there was a store named Toll Pike or Turnstile, that's what it was. But there's probably not too many people here who remember that far back on that street. And up until the early to mid 20th century, it was still fairly rustic a road. And then they had enough people driving cars that they figured it had to be paved. And so that was a noteworthy thing that all the newspapers reported, that they're paving Route 1 now and widen it so that it had actual lanes. There were several different sections to it, and starting around then they began to build the overpasses that we're pretty familiar with now. And most of them have been rebuilt at least once to be a little bit wider, a little bit sturdier, more up to date and less apt to crumble than they were when they were first built in. Downtown Newburyport was bypassed in 1934, and if you drive up that way you might remember you go down underneath a section of the main road into town, and so you don't really see the downtown of Newburyport from Route 1 very much anymore. That happened in 1934, and still, for a while, sections of it, as it got further north, were still dirt for a little while after that. So I don't know exactly the time. Obviously, this was not 1804 because they didn't have telephone poles. But otherwise, I think it looks quite a bit like it did in the old days. These stones are what they called milestones. And if you look closely at them, you'll see that the B stands for Boston, and it's saying 10 miles. 10 miles to Boston if you're driving south. And Newburyport, which is NP, is 22 miles to the north from this spot. And that other milestone, which is a little bit, the second milestone is near Felton Street, which is considered Cliftondale, I guess. It's a little south of Essex Street. We're kind of near where 99 breaks away from it now. And that one says Boston's only 5 miles and Newburyport 27. One of the things you'll notice about this picture, taken probably in the 1920s, I'm guessing from the look of the car, is all the beautiful elm trees that lined Route 1 and many other streets in Saugus. part of the reason that they're gone now, of course, is Dutch elm disease, but on Route 1 it always also is that several sections of road were widened, so some of them were taken down before that even happened. That particular spot is kind of near where the high school is right now. Here's some examples of the traffic. Oh, I said horse and wagon, but oxen and carts as well had their own fee for coming up Route 1. And here is a cartoon from several years ago. I think that might have been in the Saugus Advertiser. I'm not quite sure. Oh, no, the coloring book. And that's the late Bob Sacco's sketch showing some of the traffic going up. Now, a little bit more modern times, several lanes of traffic. People have told me they actually remember when school kids going to school would push a button so that the lights would turn red and they would walk across Route 1. My best friend lived in North Saugus, and there was one traffic light up there near Walnut Street. She lived on the other side from North Saugus School, and so that's what she did for the first few years. And then they decided that the kids from that neighborhood would go to the Lyndhurst School for a few years, and then eventually they routed them to, or bused them, I think, to the Roby School or some other school that's near the center of Saugus. And kids in Oakland Vale who had to cross the street had another light that they could push down there, and I think also there was one on Main Street. And that was about this time or even later. One of the amusing things to see in this picture is the traffic. Not what they're usually warning you about on a workday morning or afternoon. Here's a busy day, though, somewhat more so, and it looks like maybe 1930s or a little later cars even from that point. And the median strip is there now, so that's a new safety precaution. Telephone poles. Anybody out on the road last Friday when they had 7 or 8 police cars because 3 poles were threatening to fall over into Route 1 from that heavy wind? And I think this is up looking northward from Essex Street.
Essex Street?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. And I'm not 100% sure what that station is right there. But it's one of the early ones. In the 30s, 40s, and maybe even early 50s, a lot of the gas stations were private family-run stations. And some of the descendants of those gas station owners still, there's a few in Saugus now, but most of them are not on Route 1. The Gibbs station was one of the family-run stations. And Peggy Gibbs, who made a substantial donation to the Historical Society many, many decades ago, is in the middle of that picture there. She was a member of the Historical Society, and she became famous around town because she decided to open up a luncheon counter at her husband's gas station, seeing all the traffic going up and down. And she said, I'm going to hire women whose children are in school, and the lunch counter will be open from soon after school starts and closed down just before school gets out, so everyone can make the lunches and then they can go back home. So that was a big success because there were many people who wanted to work there. And this is, I think, a birthday party for her or some other event. Okay, I think I remember this when it was in Saugus. It was called the Puritan Diner and then the Turnpike Diner, I think, and was right where Walnut Street connects. I've just been told where it was. I remember going to it because we lived nearby, but I was little enough that I had no sense of distance or, you know, how you get there in the car. Many, many years from getting a driver's license at that point. So the building itself is now up in Ipswich on Route 1. It's the Agawam Diner, but it went through a couple of different names. And although I'm focusing mostly on Saugus, there are some other restaurants and locations that were well known further up in Peabody and even up into Rowley and further up the North Shore. Anybody recognize this building? It's, yes, yeah, yeah. Linfield Peabody town line, so not very far beyond Saugus. Many people had weddings there, parties, big events, fundraisers were frequently held in that location. A few of the pictures here came from a book I put out on the table in the snack room, we'll call it. They're from the booklet Visit Saugus, Cradle of American Industry, which was published in 1938. And it's kind of amusing to read the section about Route 1 because it says it's America's Wonder Road. William Callahan of the State Department of Public Works called it the most modern road in the world, especially that stretch in Saugus. Paul Haley, who helped write that, said, "No one should miss this beautiful stretch of highway in Saugus. Along it is to be seen some of the most beautiful scenery in the entire United States." Yeah, I know. I thought it might be a bit exaggerated. This is the front entrance to what's now Spinelli's, where the Town Line House used to be. And in many ways it kind of calls up the same sort of elegance, fanciness. They do the same sorts of events, club dinners and luncheons and parties, weddings, all those kinds of things. And people are likely to be pretty sentimental about those ship masts projecting up over the highway. I used to look at them when I was sort of illegally ice skating as a teenager on Walden Pond in Saugus and Lynn, because over the treetops you could see these 19th century ship masts, and I'd like to think that we were skating on the river and that was a boat on the river. In those days it was a restaurant, first Ship's Haven, and then called The Ship. And the people in the restaurant said, "You wouldn't believe how difficult it is in the way this is shaped for us to be cooking meals and serving them. It's narrow aisles, it's kind of difficult, not the most convenient shaped restaurant, but certainly quite eye-catching from a distance and a place that people remembered." And many people from northern New England and further south and elsewhere in the country and the world did come to Saugus because of all the unusual shaped buildings, and because of the different kinds of good meals they could get here. Often when I tell people even now that I come from Saugus, they'll say, "Oh yeah, Route 1. So this is before the ship was torn down, but a somewhat more recent photograph. You can see it's in color. And it looks like this is when the Christmas tree shops were there, based on the connecting buildings. Yeah, yeah. They put on a new entrance that somewhat obstructed the ship's shape, but you can see lights up over the top in the evening that made it stand out and people could see it from quite far away. Another favorite landmark for me when my family was coming home from Maine and I was in the back seat barely able to see up to the window was Gould's Flowers, because they had these wonderful different colored pampas grass in vases outside. And that was a bit of a landmark for me that I wasn't going to have to say, "How much further is it?" because I know we were getting pretty close by the time we got there. Now, Mr. Peanut, the Mr. Peanut figure still exists, but it's a long drive to get there and you can't get there from Route 1. It's now in Arkansas. So I don't think it's the whole building. I think it's just the statue. And it was changed a bit. He's still Mr. Peanut in this picture. And that's another one that I remembered to wake up from my nap in the back seat and look, and there's Mr. Peanut. And that was always a fun sight. And then it became the $50 bar. You can still see the gentleman in the top hat has a very peanut-shaped figure So it's the same sign, but with a few alterations. Now in Arkansas, it looks back a bit more like Mr. Peanut. I've seen it on pictures of it online. If you say Mr. Peanut sign, you will eventually find that. And a little souvenir from there. Plastic Peanut Man. 75th birthday. It did last quite a long time over there. And right in the vicinity, also in Peabody, is the Sea Witch, well, was the Sea Witch restaurant. I'm not sure the sign's gone even yet, but it has been closed for 9 or 10 years or so. Yeah. Yeah. The family retired. This, which I can't read well from here, so you might not be able to either, is actually a sketch map of Route 1 in Saugus. That's not good. All right, so we're looking, so at the bottom is south of Saugus, going into Melrose and Malden. And the top part is just above Walnut Street. I can see Diamond Head Restaurant on the right. That's where Augustine's was near there. Polcari's is there now, just for a little idea of orientation to that sketch map. It's still very difficult for me to always calculate exactly this was here, then this, then this, then this, because there have been so many different businesses on Route 1. And a listing of neon signs in Saugus. It was famous for the neon signs along Route 1, and people cataloged them. A few are still here. Fern's Motel is gone, but the sign is still there. The Cactus, the Hilltop Steakhouse is gone, but their cactus, luckily they decided to keep it because it's very decorative. 2005, okay. Saugus Historical Society had an exhibit on Route 1. And so that's a newspaper article about it, which contains some of the old pictures showing buildings. Russo's Candy House is up there at the top, and everybody remembers that one with nostalgia. Maybe on Route 1 as much for the beautiful building and for the ice cream as for the chocolate. In somewhat more recent years, up until when they closed just after 2022, they finally closed. They were shut down during COVID for longer than most places, but the candy was made and sold at Village Park Plaza, so off of Route 1. And I'd be there in the winter working part-time, and people would still come in right up until the end saying, I just discovered this is where you moved, after more than a decade of being gone from Route 1, and a smaller, less conspicuous, and certainly less well-traveled location. The pictures at the top of this article show Kowloon. Yeah, you can probably recognize that. Now, Carl's Sausage Kitchen left Saugus in about 2012. Sarah's is there now. And again, I'm sure that lots of people didn't realize that they moved to this little spot almost under the Route 1 bridge in Peabody, Bourbon Street. But they were open there until January of this year. And so that's, yeah, good food. You know, it had a lot of European sausages, candy, and other things that people who felt homesick for, you know, their grandparents or their own countries often would go there. So, you know, I think a lot of people were really sad to see it go. And my best friend's mother worked there for quite a few years. Here's Fern's Motel when the building was still there. The sign looks a little run down, but it's still standing. And I worked in Gottfried's in high school for afternoons for quite a few years. This would have been late 1970s, maybe 1972, 73 or so were the years that I worked there. And along with my best friend worked there, and her mother had worked there a decade or two before that. So a lot of people who live near that area, you know, if you were a teenager, you would be pretty sure that you could find a job somewhere on Route 1. Somebody would be hiring.
Southbound, right?
This is actually the northbound side. It's right at the edge of Walnut Street. What's there right now, and you might not even know it yet, is Istanbul Cafe.
Yeah.
Not Constantinople, Istanbul. Yeah, Chicken and More about a week ago was what the sign still said. Yeah, Boston Market is what the sign says in the picture. So it was that for a little while. And Uber is where the blue sign that says Godfrey's, yeah, that's Uber is in that section now. Front of the menu. What I remember mostly from that is they had all kinds of bread. It was a bakery too. And the roller shelves that the baked goods were on were a pain to clean. You know, it seemed like we had to do that every 5 minutes. If there wasn't a line at the cash register and you weren't getting stuff out for them, we had to be cleaning the rollers. They served pastrami sandwiches. Those were pretty well known. Oh, here's the diner that was moved up. It says Puritan Diner in this picture. And I think it was really right at the intersection of Route 1. Because A&P was where Walnut Place is right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where Kohl's is now, there was Child World, there was Zayre for quite a long time. Yeah. Yeah. You know, very popular location for shopping. Here's a modern view. I think might be just last Christmas what that area looks like. It's not surprising when you look at the passing of years that there's many businesses that have gone and come and gone again. I was talking not too long ago with somebody about Jolly George's, which was not one of the largest restaurants, but was one of my favorites. I never did work there, but it was one of the few places that could satisfy my very fussy tastes as a kid. Boneless fried haddock was my favorite, and it was one of the few places from Maine or anywhere else where they really didn't have any bones in it. I think where the Batteries and More and between there and the Honey Baked Ham, it's right about one of those spots. And the man who owned it was George, I can't remember his last name. I wrote it down. I probably should have made sure I turned the pages when I was supposed to. But he was from Greece, and he had served in World War II.
Is it Varellis?
Does it?
George Varellis?
Maybe. Yeah. Eventually I will find it. Varellis with a V. Yes, that sounds right. Yeah. And he fought against Germany in World War II, and he ran that restaurant for many, many years. And more than I remember when I was little talking to him, but the waitress Jackie, who seemed to be always the waitress who was there almost 24 hours a day. I never knew her last name, but people who went there probably would remember, you know, that was her name. You know, just a great little place. And again, a lot of these places were family run. Now most of what's on Route 1 are chains. Another restaurant that's still family run, that started in the 1950s or so, you will recognize from the Leaning Tower, is Prince Pizza, although this version of the building is much, much smaller than what they have now. Getting a little closer to what we might remember.
Spaghetti, right? Before that.
It might have said that. I heard that they named this after Prince Street in Lowell, which is where it first opened up. But I think there is certainly a connection. And this is much more like what it looks like today. I think I only took that picture about 5 years ago.
The building in Lowell on Prince Street, that's where they made all the spaghetti.
Oh, okay, that was more the factory
Manufactured
building.
it and set it down.
Oh, okay, yeah, thank you. So that still exists, still thriving, still a lot of activities going on there. And here it is with snow around it, and the Dunkin' Donuts next door, and then the neighbors have changed quite a bit. Good old Russo's in its original, very dramatic, beautiful form on Route 1. Yeah. Now, this building, so like again, a lot of the businesses on Route 1, the landlords are not the people who own the businesses in most cases. So when the landlord wants to charge too much money, the businesses move or close or go away. That's what happened with Russo's. They moved to a much smaller place in a more remote part of Saugus, but still existed for many years. And what came in its place? Does anybody remember?
Krispy Kreme.
That's right.
That didn't last long.
No, that's because I wouldn't go there, because I was mad. They lasted 7 months, I kept count. But I mean, many Dunkin' Donuts and Canes in Saugus, how would you think they would really thrive? And now it's a bank, and the bank, well, I don't have a grudge against the bank. Russo's little list of candies that they had, another view of that section of Route 1 right there, and the bank that now is in the same location. Also very memorable is the Red Coach Grill, and that was a restaurant chain. I do remember that I went there. I really can't remember very much about the food, but there is a remaining building, not still Red Coach Grill. I think I read that they all were closed by about 2000. But if you go into Wayland on Route 20, there's an intersection that looks very much like the Linfelds Parkway Route 1 intersection. I mean, physically it's the same angle and everything. And there's a place called the Coach Grill. So they didn't even want to spend the money to change the sign. They just said, okay, this restaurant is abandoned. We like it. We're going to paint it over and do what, name it as close as we can do it without getting in trouble. So this is the one in Saugus, but the one, if you go to Route 20, you'll say, I feel very nostalgic. It feels like home. Souvenir ashtray that I think the Historical Society owns. And El Torito it was for a little while, and then became Kelly's as one of part of the chain that started in Revere. They actually started selling hot dogs, but the people who founded it also worked in the wedding venue down the street in Revere, and they had some leftover roast beef from a wedding that was canceled. So they said, let's try selling it at the hot dog stand. And they sold out within an hour. So they said, okay, I guess we got a good idea from this. We'll sell roast beef too, and seafood, and that's how they became well known. There's now about 6 or 7 in Florida, and one in Worcester, one in Salem, New Hampshire, Medford, Needham? Okay, yeah. A few other places in Massachusetts, sort of scattered franchises, I guess. And right behind that spot on the corner, where there's now a shopping center, I guess I would call it, not an enclosed mall, but it's where Michael's used to be and is being refurbished into something else. That was the drive-in theater for quite a few years. It opened up and people went from miles and miles around. They had a little playground up near the screen, big screen, and my parents said I could go up and play at the playground, but I was just too shy to get out of the car, so I just sat and made noise and distractions in the back seat instead. So here's a flyer for it. They showed a lot of different movies, very popular. Somewhat later, it must have existed until the early 70s anyway, because I remember going and sitting in the gem store parking lot where you couldn't hear the movies, but you could still watch them. And then you'd get a good idea if you wanted to pay the money and go to the movie, you know, just from seeing a little bit of it. Here, this white vehicle is going northbound, but what we can see is Pier 1 Imports and the little strip mall where GameStop used to be and Artist and Craftsman is right along there. And that building really doesn't seem to have changed very much, the businesses inside. But, you know, here's one of the latest losses on Route 1, the Continental. 72 years in business on that spot. I didn't realize it had changed as much. Those awnings and things, it doesn't really look like the same building as they started out with, but it is at least in the same spot. And next to it was Caruso Diplomat, where, and that was not quite, well, more modernistic, not quite as elegant as the Town Line House, but did the same sort of things. Big dining room for fundraisers, weddings, big enough to have dances. They had dance hall there. Some of the signs from I think a 1960s brochure of businesses in Saugus. And it's not exactly the same spot, but right next to where Trader Joe's is now. And so I think it's Regency Plaza, although that's a tiny sign. Everybody says it's Trader Joe's, but it's the name of the plaza that has Lazy Boy. Lazy Boy is all covered up with signs. They're not going out of business, but they're doing remodeling, so you can't see what's inside. Biggest sale in history. That's probably a little exaggeration too, like Route 1 being the most beautiful street in the United States. And a snowy day right outside there. Border Cafe. The side for the Continental when it was still busy. I mean, what I remember from the Continental is probably mostly garden club dinners, which were held. One of the last garden club, well, certainly the last garden club dinner at the Continental was just a week before they closed. Donna will remember we had reservations for the week later, and we said, well, but you're going to be closed then. Can we make it earlier? And rush to, you know, have a last meal there. Now, Mandarin House is not the name we all know it by now, but this is Kowloon. And so Kowloon has remained very popular for decades and has the comedy club up there now. They have a takeout area. They have a bar. I'm not sure I've even been in all the rooms at Kowloon. But the Bruins, it was one of the favorite places for the Bruins to eat and to gather a couple decades ago. Many of them lived in Linfield. And so it was an easy place. They all liked the food. They still have events there sometimes. So, you know, this is, I think about 5 years ago I took this picture. I don't know when, it must have been early in the morning because there's not much traffic. I mean, not much cars in the parking lot, and many of the times I go there, unless it's breakfast, it's full. A souvenir glass that I think the Historical Society has, a view from right near Kowloon, looking up. I think, yeah, this is still looking northbound, because I don't really even want to bring it up, but the little red roofed building.
The product.
Is that where Hanson was across the street? Hanson Machine? They used to have a radio station.
Oh,
Was it
I'm not
Main
sure.
Street and then Stop and Shop? But there was I think it was Hanson's.
Okay.
Machine shop. Man,
Yeah, I'm not really sure. This building, I shot for my wedding dress there, so at least in the mid-1990s it was still standing.
Weddings Incorporated.
Yeah, and it was really at the foot of the overpass on Main Street.
Right.
You know, it's hard to believe that there was a building there. It doesn't look big enough for there have been something, but it was there for a long time. And the billboard that has its back to us over there is still on the bridge. Who was this? Oh, I think
That's a good deal.
I think that's John Martin's, which was there before Prince. I can't really see it on the, oh, no, sorry, before Hilltop. It was one of those two restaurants that John Martin's was before there, and last time I talked about it, some people remembered it, so.
Yeah, I think it used to be where Valleys was.
Oh, Valleys, okay,
Valleys,
that
and then it
makes
was
sense.
John Martin's
Yes.
Manor.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
don't know what's there now.
Yeah.
CVS.
See, oh, yeah.
Oh, somebody said Joanne's is where Valleys used to be.
Yeah,
But again,
Joanne's.
when Valleys was important, I wasn't driving yet, so,
That's where we had, we were the first couple to have a wedding reception there.
oh, very nice, okay. Yeah, and Hilltop might be one of the most famous places. So many events happen, and it was such a huge place, they could have several wedding receptions at once in different rooms, and often did. I ate there a few times, but not very often. We'd be driving over, and my father would say, "Look at that line, that's crazy. I'm not waiting in that. Why don't we go somewhere, you know, Valleys, or, you know, some other place in town that didn't seem like there would be a long wait for it." So, and they owned a building next door too for a while. They had a meat market, but everybody remembers the cows. Some of those cows have reappeared. I think the Market Street in Linfield, there was one of the cows over there that was probably legally purchased to put in that place.
One is in that MIT museum,
Oh, okay.
because the one up on the dome.
And there was one further down Route 1 in Malden for a while, near a gas station. But I'm not sure that one's still there. Do you know the name of it? Well, and you know, they'd have Santa hats at Christmas. Easter bonnets, I think, in the spring. And the placemats, paper placemats that would show you where all the cuts came from. Some people turned their placemat over because they didn't really want to think about it that much. You know, souvenir mug, lots of things that they had over there. And the cactus is so iconic. Anybody know what kind of cactus that is? Saguaro. Yeah, which doesn't grow in Saugus. New Mexico, Arizona. But here's the sign, refurbished with the new businesses along it. So I'm glad that they didn't take the cactus out of Saugus. It's about 55 feet tall. And real saguaros grow very big too. If they're old, they can be extremely large. When Hilltop was still there, here's Hockeytown, USA. Now that might not be as well known to as many people unless you play hockey. But somebody in this room played hockey in his 40s there for a while, and somebody else that I know still plays hockey sometimes in the older leagues. Oh, okay.
They played
Right.
there and for the high school.
Yeah, they have a lot of tournaments, and I think the Bruins had an event, Paralympic skating or something. I think it was in that building. They said it was in Saugus, and it didn't look like the inside of Kasabuski rink, what I could see on TV. They didn't name it, but that's where I think it was. And that's been there since the early 60s, maybe even a little longer than that. So that's one of the older businesses. That's on the southbound side. Now this is not Valleys, actually. This is the sign that's down in Revere over the line. You'd come around, there's a billboard there. There's a big church, I think, down in that section, but it's not actually in Saugus. We still have a shopping center in this location. This is where Square One Mall is now. And it was new and very exciting when I was small. When I was 12, one of my friends wanted to go to the charm school that Sears had and wanted somebody to go with her, so I went with her. You may say I didn't learn much, but oh well. I still have a sweater that I got. At the end, we did a fashion show, and I'm sure it was hoped that our mothers would buy the clothes that we modeled because we got a 10% discount on whatever we wore in the fashion show. Now this was not an enclosed mall. There were not many of those back in those times, so it was sort of, this is the plan view. And up in the top, where it bends, there's a little courtyard, and tiny shops all numbered. 31, which is up there in the corner, was Zenon Jewelers. And that was where my first job was. I worked there on Saturdays running the cash register so the jeweler could look dignified at his desk. So.
Used to be a driving range before that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. I think I remember seeing that. The Flamingo, anybody remember that? Okay.
Oh, yeah, very well.
Yeah. And these are. Telephone Lounge, yes, that's right, I've heard that. I didn't go there, but these are some souvenirs that the Historical Society got donated, you know, the matchbook, the old sign after the place was gone, some spoons, some souvenirs from Valleys, you know, which probably the bright colored menu will be recognizable to people who went there often. Looking across at Hilltop from the McDonald's. Now the McDonald's had a sort of ordinary shape, and then they rebuilt it several years ago to look more like the original McDonald's with the golden arches. So they kind of took a retro approach, and so the arches go through the roof. People also tend to notice the Cadillac that the owner parks there. And then this spot, many people in this room, I think, spent 3 or 4 years in a building on this site. Hopefully they didn't spend it in the building that was there before that. Wow. So originally, originally this big estate that you see in the picture was William Tudor's summer home. William Tudor was a friend of George Washington's. He lived in Boston during the winter, and then he'd come to rural Saugus during and after the Revolutionary War to his summer estate. And Stevens Pond across Route 1 was part of that summer estate. William's son, Frederick Tudor, was known as the Ice King. He got the idea of harvesting ice from the pond and taking it insulated in sawdust down to the West Indies and encouraging people to have chilled drinks and chilled food. And it seemed like people said, that's not going to take off. Nobody's going to want that. But it eventually did. And so he had ice houses in India and many places by the time his career was done. Close-up of the house. But it eventually did become the Poor Farm. And it was that up until the beginning of the 20th century. So very nice looking house, but the people would have to work out in the fields and grow vegetables because they couldn't support themselves. And then it became Gordon's Pansies. So the fields that had been worked in by the residents of the Poor Farm, now it was an ornamental garden center.
How far up? So the high school's over here,
I think this was,
across Route 1?
I'm not sure. What? Same side? Yeah, I think it was like where the playing fields were, and the new high school is now, and Kitty Ranch, yep, I remember that one. Yeah, didn't like that being taken away. Here's the old high school, but for most of my life, when I said old high school, they think it's the building in Saugus Center that still stands. It's kindergarten and maybe offices or something else now too. New England Shopping Center, upper section with Kmart.
International House and Pancake.
Yes, yep, that was there. And Stop and Shop is kind of right next to where that was now. Here's Kitty Ranch. I knew I had a picture somewhere of it. How about Sub Villa? That was always one of my favorites. You know, went with my family. When my best friend got her driver's license a few years before I did, we'd go over there every chance we got, and you know, loved the subs. They had all the things I liked, and I have a little page here. I'll read some of it. Nancy Prague worked at Sub Villa. Many of you may know her. She's the chairman of the tree committee, and she worked there when she was in high school. She wrote this: I learned more about life on Route 1 than I ever expected, and it all started at Santoro's Sub Villa. My first job was at the original spot where Walgreens stands now, and I was 15, itching to start earning my own cash. Let me tell you, those were some of the best memories. My first few paychecks went straight into buying a new suede coat, which I thought was the coolest thing ever at the time. Bob Santoro was the kind of boss everyone dreams of having. How many of us can say that about our first boss when we were in high school? He expected us to do our job, but it was fair, a family man who treated us with nothing but respect. And of course he had a sense of humor that kept us all laughing, even when the line at the counter stretched out the door. Bob gave us tons of responsibility, whether it was ringing up orders, slicing cold cuts, or assembling party platters like we were assembling masterpieces. He sometimes caught me eating olives when I made salads. Saturdays were pure chaos. Lines out the door with truckers, regulars, and workers on their lunch breaks from nearby businesses, like Sears and Midas, all stopping by for lunch. Sometimes we even got a busload of hungry tourists. But what really made the job interesting were the late night shifts. Folks who lived at the nearby hotels would swing by for dinner, flirting and trying their luck. This is the 1970s. And let's not forget the dancers from the Green Apple, always arriving in full glam attire, their stories as colorful as their outfits. My friends and I had a blast working with an amazing crew, sharing laughs, inside jokes, and plenty of unforgettable moments together. Looking back, Santoro's wasn't just a job, it was my little slice of life on Route 1, where I learned about work, love, and everything in between. When I said how many people had a good boss their first job, Zenon was a good boss. So I didn't mean to say he wasn't. He was very nice. But later on in high school and college, you know, a lot of them were just saying like, yep, I can replace you fast if you don't work fast enough. Question?
Santoros
Yeah.
original was in front of Barnett's, where Dunkin' Donuts. Barnett's is where the Sub Villa is now. It was an old house, a corner store. Then he had a little shop, and then he moved across the street where Walgreens is.
Okay.
And then he moved back.
Oh, I didn't know all those. I only remember the Sub Villa location where the sign is still.
I'm a little old.
Okay. I forget what cabins these are. Chisholm's. I think that's up sort of the south end of the Saugus part. And the minkery. Does anybody remember that? A mink farm. One of the more bizarre businesses I've heard of being in Saugus. And that was down there kind of near what was originally Felton Circle and then became DeFranco Circle, enlarged a little bit. Sort of where 99 goes off the end. And this is Whaley's, an aerial view from that hilltop where they were. How do I describe exactly? It's on the northbound side, but it was near the southern end of Saugus, just before you went into. Yes, exactly. Yeah, and you know you could see it from a long distance because it was a big building and it was high on a hill. That road must not have been very much fun on a snowy day. But spectacular looking place. Well, I mean, obviously less than half the lifetime of Kowloon, but it was there from, I don't know, my early adulthood, I don't know, 20 years I think, and then the building stayed after they had closed down for a while. Chickland, near the Palace, which is kind of near where Lowe's is, or right near, part of Lowe's parking lot maybe is it now. And they served a lot of dinners, lots of big events, parties, club meetings and group meetings were in that spot too. I don't really remember that. I do remember, yeah, the Palace. Yeah. So, you know, that I mean, you could have had a color picture of that, but it was in a newspaper back when newspapers didn't have color pictures. And this is some of the parties it shows going on. I think they put that in. And there was a little neighborhood behind that too, that Osprey Road, the Bird Streets, people called it. There were several streets.
Down on Main Street.
Yes, yep. And this is the demolition of the Palace. The Blue Star Bar, right where 99 breaks off from Route 1. And there's, I'm not sure if it was still Felton Circle in this picture, if it was DeFranco Circle by this point, but there's a newspaper picture of it. The sign mentioning Arthur DeFranco, who was the first World War II casualty in Saugus, and we've had some programs on him. I think it was last spring, it might have been. Okay, here it was still Felton Circle, and that building behind the elm trees is the Howard Johnsons. So the Howard Johnsons in Saugus was there. The other thing that was there was Adventure Car Hop, which I think somebody mentioned. Yeah, and this is near the toll house, which, so when I said that Route 1 was a turnpike, that toll house stood for a long time after 1847 when they stopped taking tolls, and people lived in the house and the toll house was next to it. It's kind of near where Felton Street sort of dead ends at Route 1 now. And you used to be able to just come off Route 1 and go up into that street. Now, the little boy that grew up in the household, the family that collected the tolls, Cornelius Felton, later went to school, became a Greek and Latin scholar, and was eventually president of Harvard University. Maybe he studied his books in between collecting the tolls, I don't know. And this is an aerial view of that toll house area. And the funny little layout there, that's the miniature golf course. Okay, I'm going to have to talk a little faster, I think. So the dinosaurs left. There was also a green dinosaur over there. And many miniature golf courses had dinosaurs. There's one in Salisbury now that has, I swear, the same orange dinosaur but with different teeth. You know, that one has pointed dentures and ours has flatter ones. That was where my 6th grade birthday party was, the only birthday party that wasn't at home, but we all played miniature golf, had lots of fun. Yeah, here's one of the most famous places. Arnie Ginsberg he was a DJ, forget what channel, and then he moved to a different AM radio channel, but in the days of early rock and roll, this was the station to listen to, and he frequently broadcast from Adventure Car Hop, sang little jingles about it. He wrote a few songs about it right there. There were little coins, and if you, at some point, if you ordered a Ginsburger, which was a cheeseburger with his favorite toppings on it, you could get one free. And so people would go with their buddy and get, you know, 2 for the price of 1 very often, or they'd go and buy one and eat the other one too. And, you know, it was really popular. That was a great thing to do.
And whereabouts was that?
So that was near where Route 99 comes off from Route 1.
Yeah.
So the mini golf place was in that area. But there was a circle. I don't remember when they changed the circle to the current shape.
Can I correct you?
Sure.
Just below the Fellsway.
Yeah.
Where they put Pratt overpass it.
Okay.
North of that.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting. All right. Huh, okay, yeah. I don't really remember being on that circle, and different people have told me different things. But that does make sense, because I think Anthony Samarco said that it was, that the Howard Johnson's was near the Fellsway.
No. Howard Johnson was at the Friends of Circle.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right on the Felton Street.
Okay.
In the Felton Street.
All right. I think I understand the sequence of things now. Now, Arnie Ginsberg retired to another town on Route 1. He moved up to Agunquit, Maine, and passed away in 2020. But he was pretty well known, a fixture up there too. He would walk his dog around town.
Kids who came down from Nova Scotia always went to the Adventure Car Hop because the signal from Boston went right across the water into Lower.
Wow. Huh. Wow, I didn't know it was that strong a signal. Fantastic. Here's some matchbook covers, because of course everybody was using matches back in those days, from all the different restaurants on Route 1. Here's a little map of the Route 1 section through the North Shore that was in a Boston Globe article, I think, about the roadway, and a dramatic sunset over the road. All right.
No cows, duck.
What?
No cows, duck.
No, now that was up north of Walnut Street, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Where Jimmy's is now.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
My brother used to work there from the Aggie,
Right.
and he weighed about 95 pounds, and the feed weighed 100 pounds.
Oh! So it had to carry him rather than the other way around. Wow.
The Chinese restaurant, there was the Diamond Head.
Yes.
Which is now, it's an Italian restaurant now.
Polcari's.
Polcari's,
Yes.
that's it. Yeah.
Yep, that's right. Diamond Head was one of my favorites. I do remember that. And Peking dumplings, I think, is what people call them most often, or gyoza is the Japanese word. They had them. And lychees, which are a little fruit that, is tropical and most people don't know, but
That
yeah,
New England shopping center, there was a barber shop in the courtyard. And there was a
Oh,
radio
yes.
shack there.
Yeah.
The barber that is in there, that worked in there, works right up here in Cliftondale at George's.
George's?
Yeah.
He's up
Oh, okay.
yeah, he's my barber. He's up in his
Wow.
90s.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
the original barber that was from there.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew people would have some good memories of this, this neighborhood, but, yeah.
Yeah, it's like Ginsburg.
What else have we missed? I'm sure there's,
The Yamato Station, North Plum. On it.
Yeah, that Eats American.
oh, okay. Oh, of course.
Larry Saugus.
Yes, yeah, that's right. I don't remember exactly where that was, but was it near Walnut Street? Is it-
U-Haul.
U-Haul.
Oh, okay. Yeah, all right. Yeah, so just a little north of Polcari's then.
Right.
Great, okay. Yeah. All right, well, we should then go back to eating food. And there's two books. That book I was referring to that called it America's Wonder Highway, that's out there on the table, you can look through. And then the Norman Downs book about Saugus, I bookmarked the pages that are about, that show different parts of the turnpike from many decades ago.